Welcome everybody in this GIMI think tank platform. As you know, GIMI does every week a webinar around innovation, cutting edge trends, state of innovation of a country, innovative products or innovation management tools. Actually, today is a bit different, and what we are doing right now in partnership with IXL Center is that one webinar per month, we will focus on green hydrogen because we believe this is one of the main trends that is going on, and we would like to familiarize the audience and create more awareness around this topic. This is the first one that we will host together. I have the pleasure to leave it to my colleague Carolina to give you a little bit more update and share a little bit of knowledge about what is this topic, and as well present the speaker for today. Thank you, Carolina. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Arilla, and thank you everyone, and welcome to this very insightful session that we will have today. So as Arilla was mentioning, as most of you will know, energy transition right now is a very hot topic around the globe. So we are trying, as a part of the GIMI think tank and as part of the IXL Energy Transition Network, to actually share this as much knowledge as we can around this topic so that we can all learn from different geographies, from different industries, and from different companies around the globe around this topic, and then of course share best practices and pretty much connect with each other on this energy transition trend and industry that we are facing right now. So for that, we have a very interesting and insightful speaker today with us. We have Horacio Pinzón. Just to give you a little bit of background about him, he has more than 10 years of experience in the energy transition industry and energy industry pretty much, mainly focused on energy sources for the oil and gas industry. He's currently leading the new business development area focused on hydrogen mobility and also in natural gas blending at Ecopetrol. For the ones that don't know Ecopetrol is actually a $32 billion company in Colombia that is focused on exploration, development, and production of oil and gas in Latin America. Horacio has also been leading 3 of the 7 projects that has been happening in Colombia around the use of hydrogen as a new source of energy in different locations and geographies in the country, with very good potential and good results from those pilots that he has been leading. He has a bachelor's degree and master's degree in mechanical engineering. He's also achieved the 3 levels of certification from the Global Innovation Management Institute, so congratulations for that, Horacio. And he is the author also of several articles and research papers around energy transition, and then around also some of the oil and gas initiatives that he was leading on the companies that he has been working before. So thank you very much for being here, Horacio. So I'm gonna leave you with the crowd. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Carolina, and first of all, thank you also for this invitation to speak to the GIMI think tank. Thanks also to Hitendra, to Ronald for considering me for this session as well. As you were mentioning, the idea of today is briefly 30 minutes, 40 minutes that we will be here talking to each other. I would like you to know that I would like to give you some sort of context about the Colombia energy transition regarding hydrogen economy. And please, if you have any questions while I'm talking about or something like that, don't hesitate to ask. The idea is to have a nice conversation today regarding green hydrogen and the Colombian economy or worldwide impact as well. So I always start these kind of conversations talking about the general concept of energy transition, because I think it's not well understood at its fullest today. So when we talk about energy transition, we would like to make reference to 2 things mainly, or 2 big trends, right? Innovation is all about recognizing trends, so energy transition is also part of that. When you talk about energy in a global context, in a country context, you may have to talk about two primarily energy sources or forms of energy, which is electricity and thermal energy. Not only in Colombia, but also in a global context, the thermal energy makes the most part of the energy form that is used in the industry and in our houses. Think about your house and your way of life. You use electricity for your house, but you also use diesel or gasoline for movement, for example. In countries in Latin America, for example, it's very common to cook with natural gas and not with electricity. So, as energy users, we use two forms of energy: electricity and thermal energy. The current status worldwide is that the thermal energy makes the most part of the energy use, and fossil fuels contributes the most to that energy sources. So when you see here that breakdown, it's easy to identify that electricity makes the tiniest part, thermal goes the largest part, and then the renewable contribution for such segments doesn't make the most of it yet. So, for example, in countries like Colombia, when we say that our electricity matrix is mostly renewable because we use a lot of hydro, either way, we're using natural gas and coal to back up that renewable production using hydro. So we have a mix of fossil fuels and renewables for both electricity and thermal energy. And the energy transition is the merging of two big trends. The first is the electrification of the end users. So each year, the electricity form of energy is becoming the primarily use of energy. And there are new technologies that allow us to shift our processes or end user devices into electricity. For example, I just moved from a Caribbean city here in Colombia to Bogota. And for example, the way to cook changed for me. In Barranquilla, the city I was born, we used to cook with natural gas because the Caribbean coast in Colombia is full of natural gas, and it's customary to have all your house devices for cooking using natural gas. But here in Bogota, for example, the new way of building homes, that's like a new trend, uses electric ovens. So for me, it was a change. And that sort of changes are becoming more often in the market. So the first trend is the electrification of the end users will come in a more regular basis. And that trend will also impact industrial processes. The second trend will be the disruption of low or zero emission energy carriers. So not even it will be not only a matter of more electrification in the demand, but the way we fulfill that energy needs will become more carbon neutral. Meaning that, for example, the electricity will be provided by renewable electricity sources like solar or wind, but also the thermal uh, energy will be fulfilled by zero or low emission energy carriers. For example, hydrogen, right? And that's how we will be putting some puzzles in the table to make this conversation. So, in terms of futuristic forecasts, uh, agencies like the International Energy Agency and others forecast that the electrification will cover up to 50% of the demand by 2050. So electrification will be a big player or big trend in the future energy economy, but it will last up to 50% of the demand. And for example, for electricity share, the best estimates say that the renewable part of the electricity will come from renewables up to 89%. So you'll have either 10% using current fuels like coal or natural gas. Natural gas primarily, of course, in the future. So the idea is to have a better glimpse how these green bars will be fulfilled. And in both cases, for electricity and for thermal energy, hydrogen will be a very important part of that fulfillment strategy. So when you see, for example, how the energy sources will contribute to that energy demand in the future, you will see two big trends. The first is that fossil fuels, of course, will diminish in the future, but it won't be zero. There are some parts of the industry that would require uh, fossil fuels like oil and natural gas. And in some cases, those applications cannot be unabated. Now, if you see on the red part of the graph, the low emission sources, you will also see fossil fuels like natural gas, oil, and coal, but they would have an abatement technology that will capture the CO2 that is released when used, right? And therefore, it would become a low emission technology. So it's like the current technology plus a new technology that allow the base technology to not emit um, the greenhouse emissions gases as they do it now. And you see also the two primarily leaders in terms of energy sourcing, solar and modern bioenergy. So there will be a lot of innovation in terms of converting energy sources like hydrogen, like biomass, into modern bioenergy that may be understood as uh, synthesizing new fuels that may be equivalent to natural gas or to all derivatives like diesel or gasoline, jet fuel, and so on, with zero or low emission sources. So let's think about using our current technology, let's say the mining truck, that it will be very difficult to electrify. So taking the mining truck or an airplane, and instead of putting batteries into it, we will synthesize the same diesel or jet fuel with zero emission sources. That will be, for example, taking green hydrogen or low emission hydrogen plus a biogenic source of carbon to synthesize a new hydrocarbon. It will emit, of course, it will have some emissions, but those emissions are now neutralized because, for example, in terms of carbon, that will come from biomass that captured in a previous time CO2 from the air. And that's how the energy trends will come up in terms of producing the hydrogen. The energy and hydrogen will play a big role there. When you see in terms of consumption, you see here, for example, in terms of buildings and transport, the rule will be zero emissions or low emission technologies. In very rare cases like mining, like maritime technologies like aircrafts, you'll have some room in terms of transport for unabated fossil fuels, but the room it will be too short for that. Like as a in general as a global economy, we will allow just unabated fossil fuels use for the industry sector. And of course, we're going to enforce the use of carbon capture, use and storage technologies, but there will be, or we anticipate that there will be some applications where that the use of such technologies will not be possible. And for example, in buildings, it will be rare to have the use of unabated fossil fuels. So we are also pushing in terms of the demand, the use of zero and low emission fossil fuels. It's not new. It's not new, of course. It's something that we have been talking about a lot. But it's very interesting to realize that first, there will be room for the current or customary energy carriers like natural gas, oil, and coal, and that we will have some sort of different shares depending on the consumption sector. Now, why is important hydrogen in the current economy and the future economy as well? Hydrogen today is used as a feedstock. So if we are preparing like a soup, for example, the hydrogen would be the carrots, the potatoes, the water, the salt, right? You put it into the soup, right? It's a feedstock. It's part of the soup. It's part of the product. And it's mainly used in three industry sectors. Refineries, because it guarantees the quality of the end product by removing the sulfur components of it. The second is fertilizers, as being the main part of the ammonia that is converted then in fertilizers. So it's super important in terms of the food industry, for example. And third is steel production. And it's also used, like in refineries, to remove all the impurities that comes in the iron ore. So it's used as a feedstock. The trendy thing about hydrogen nowadays is that we are considering hydrogen as an energy carrier for energy purposes, enabling the last three applications that you see here in this slide. First, as an energy storage, as a fuel for thermal use, as electricity generation. So if you remember that graph, when we have to fill the green bars for both electricity and thermal use, hydrogen will be playing a very important part, a very important role filling those green bars, right? And energy storage is very important because in some parts of the world now, for example, California and some countries in Europe, that has been working or filling their energy, the electricity matrix with renewables, now they are facing a very big challenge. In some parts of the day, mainly uh, around noon, there are a lot of energy that has that is in excess, that is not being used. So you have the option to convert those electrons, those electricity, that electricity that will be at very, very, very low cost into hydrogen for later use. So hydrogen is very versatile, is very important in terms of energy management, and will play, as I mentioned, a very important role in different parts of the economy and the energy industry. How do we think it will evolve? Right now, the last numbers in the 2020 outlook that was performed by the by the Hydrogen Council and by the International Energy Agency states that the production of hydrogen is around 90 million tons of hydrogen per year. We say tons in terms of mass because as the energy, as the hydrogen is being used as a feedstock, the use of mass is very customary here. And they think that by 2050, it would increase the worldwide production up to 660 million tons of hydrogen per year. That's an incredible growth rate. And if you see the industry sectors that most likely will be using that hydrogen are going to be mobility, because there are some applications that is very, very complicated to electrify, like freight, like maritime, like aircrafts, for example. Most likely they would use either hydrogen directly or a hydrogen derivative like methanol or ammonia or e-jet, for example. You will have the same uses that you have right now in terms of existing industry use. So they will use low emission hydrogen to decarbonize their processes, of course. There will be another industry feedstocks or another new industry sectors that will use hydrogen as a feedstock, for example. And you also have power generation. So converting hydrogen into electricity by a means of a turbine or by means of means of a fuel cell, but either way, having electricity generation based on hydrogen, as I explained before. And how important that would be. Up to 22% of the global final energy demand will be provided by hydrogen as a fuel. That's a lot. That's a lot. That number is like the average forecast. You will find things like 18% or 24%, but most likely the most of the forecast of the many energy agencies that perform these outlooks uh, convene that the contribution of hydrogen will be around 20%. Now, what's next for Colombia then? If hydrogen will play a very important role in the worldwide economy, how will play Colombia on that? On the left-hand side, you see, for example, a current status of hydrogen production in Latin America. This report was also developed by the International Energy Agency 2 years ago. And if you see over here, from those 90 million tons a year, you have a very small contribution in countries like Colombia, Mexico, Argentina. The only exception will be Trinidad and Tobago in Latin America. And the reason for that is that the production is for internal use. For example, in Colombia, those 0.2 million tons are produced by Ecopetrol in their refineries to guarantee the quality of the fuels. But it's like the ones that need it produces in their own operation. The only exception, as I mentioned, is Trinidad and Tobago because they produce ammonia and methanol. They are the main ammonia and methanol hub for this part of the world. For example, all the methanol and all the ammonia that is used in Colombia comes from mostly Trinidad and Tobago. So they have like a very important position right now in terms of those hydrogen derivatives. All of them coming from fossil fuels, though. So they have a lot of challenge in terms of decarbonizing their actual production. But what's next? How Colombia see themselves as a player in the hydrogen economy, as an exporter. So the worldwide economy in terms of energy and in terms also hydrogen will play an important or significant role for Latin America in terms of having a lot of renewable capacity installed and a lot of renewable potential. The idea is to convert those wind conditions and solar conditions, those biomass availability into low emission fuels. And given that our economy is tiny compared to others in the world like Asia and Europe, the idea is to export those fuels into those countries. The main importers by the International Energy Agency will be Europe, United States, and Japan and Korea, most likely. And actually, if you follow the conversation regarding the hydrogen economy, most likely the first bids or the first tenders regarding hydrogen use are being located in Europe, in countries like Germany, like the Netherlands, and Asia, like Korea or Japan. Those are the countries that are moving the economy right now. And the main demand will appear by 2030. The bigger tenders or bids that we are like identifying today in the market most likely will require hydrogen by 2030. And all Latin America and of course Colombia are preparing themselves to develop all the infrastructure that allow us to produce the hydrogen and all the derivative products to export to those markets in the upcoming years. 2030 in terms of the scale of the projects that you need is meaning that you will need to take the final investment decision for that infrastructure in the upcoming 24 months. So that's a very, very important and actual conversation right now in all the energy companies in Latin America. How Colombia will achieve that? This is like a glimpse of the current hydrogen strategy. The idea is that by 2050, Colombia will produce up to almost 2 million tons of hydrogen or low emission hydrogen per year. Is that big? Is that small? You can judge yourself. All the pie represents 660 million tons by 2050. So you would think that would be too low. I think we have a lot of renewable potential in Colombia to increase that number a lot. I think, for example, all the Ecopetrol's portfolio right now has 2 million tons of hydrogen identified and in the steps of evolving the project in order to implement it. So I think that potential is going to be bigger in the future. But what you can see in the graph is that the main trend, the growth rate will increase after 2030. So the challenge is to be like an early player by 2030 and position yourself as a country or as a company in the hydrogen market in the upcoming years. And talking about some sort of the innovation methodology that the GIMI promotes, you may have two fields of play. You may have an international field of play and a national field of play. And in those terms, Colombia has set its goals. In terms of international field of play, the idea is to have an installed capacity big enough that allow Colombia to produce hydrogen to export to those markets that I mentioned before. So having from 1 to 3 gigawatts of installed capacity in terms of electrolyzers, which is the core technology for green hydrogen production, is the goal for 2030. Is that big? Is that small? You may also have your own conclusions, but right now the ballpark, the average ballpark in terms of capacity in the worldwide projects, it's around 200 megawatts. So we are aiming to have 4 or 6 big production projects in Colombia in the next 5-6 years. There are some exceptions. You have projects in the Middle East that right now accounts for a gigawatt or 2 gigawatt installed capacity in such project, and that's like the largest facilities that you can know right now or that you have mapped in your hydrogen projects worldwide. The local field of play is super interesting because hydrogen will also contribute to decarbonize some sectors, in this case in Colombia. The transport sector in Colombia is responsible for using up to the 30% of the final use energy use. So from the 100%, 30% goes directly to transport sector in terms of diesel, gasoline, jet fuel, methanol, and such fossil fuels. And is responsible as well by producing the 25 to 29% of the greenhouse emissions in Colombia, the transport sector. If you take into account the anthropogenic sources, if you take into account forestry or let's say deforestation, agriculture is around 10% the transport. So given that Colombia has set the NDC around 51% reduction in the climate accords, reducing the emissions and reducing the energy consumption or replacing the energy sources in sectors like transport is paramount to guarantee the fulfillment of those goals in terms of greenhouse gases reduction. And for that, Colombia has set what I think is a very, very important goal to have from 2.5 thousand to 3.5 thousand fuel cell electric vehicles moving in the country by 2030. That means like developing from 50 to 100 hydrogen refueling stations in the country in the next 7 years. I think that that challenge is super big. I think it will be super complicated to achieve, but that's the challenge. That's what the government is telling us, the companies in Colombia, to aim to those kind of industry impacts in the country. That's, for example, my primary role here in Ecopetrol in the last year that I joined the company is to lead the mobility projects to achieve such goals in the next years. So what's next for companies in Colombia, like the one that I work on, which is Ecopetrol? We are developing, we are implementing a strategy up to 2040 that is called Energy That Transforms. And we are adding new building blocks to our NDA, to our DNA, sorry. As Carolina mentioned, we are a large company primarily focused on oil and gas, but we are adding some energy carriers of the transition. We are also adding things like hydrogen, and our goal is to produce 1 million ton of hydrogen, low emission hydrogen by 2040. So if you compare that to the previous numbers I was mentioning before, we are aiming to have the 60% of the Colombians' goal by 2050, 10 years earlier, which is a huge challenge for us here in the low emission business unit. We are the first player, or the main player in terms of renewable generation. Today, we produce up to 200 megawatts or we have up to 200 megawatts of installed capacity in terms of renewable electricity. And we think we are aiming to multiply by 4 that number in 2 years, so having 900 megawatts of installed capacity by 2025. That's having like almost the 10% of the electricity in the country generated by that. That's for our own use because we are not allowed to sell that electricity. But as we are one of the main companies using energy in the country, we are responsible for the 10% of the overall energy consumption in the country. That will be a very, very good target to have a renewable matrix, not only for Ecopetrol, but also for the country. And we are adding things like renewable fuels and synthetic fuels, primarily based on hydrogen, and also in carbon that is captured from biogenic sources like biomass and other related products. We're also incorporating biogas and some natural climate solutions. The idea of this whole strategy and adding these building blocks to the energy transition is that up to 50% of the EBITDA in 2040 will come from low emission solution businesses. That means that the oil and gas part will contribute to 50%. And that's how we will gonna make the energy transition, of course, a business and also a profitable business. That's the goal by 2040. In terms of hydrogen strategy, as I mentioned before, we're producing 1 million ton of hydrogen per year, aiming to have a 400 million EBITDA per year by 2040. And that will be located in 4 major business units in our operations, because we have to replace the hydrogen we produce from natural gas with renewable sources. Sustainable mobility, we would like to lead the energy transition for the mobility sector in Colombia. Actually, we have implemented up to the moment 2 pilots here in Colombia. I'm gonna talk about that in a moment. Natural gas blending It's also important to decarbonize the natural gas sectors and industries like the thermal generation based on fossil fuels, and also the commercial and residential sectors using natural gas. In Colombia, natural gas is a very important energy carrier, and the extent of the natural gas used for residential and commercial uses is like 90% of the demand. So it's very important as a country to decarbonize the natural gas. For that, and of course, to connect with international markets, having low carbon products as ammonia, as methanol, and EJET, and other related products, as I mentioned before, in order to take the hydrogen we produce locally or in other parts of Latin America and to put it in international markets. We are not doing this alone. We think as the business innovation mandates that it's very important to build your network, and we are partnering with the most important companies worldwide, the best energy players around the world, like Siemens, like EDF, like Mitsui, to develop projects not only in Colombia but in other parts of the region as well. And to show you a little bit of some examples of what we are doing right now in Colombia and in Ecopetrol as well. One of the projects that I love the most in Colombia, but also in the region, is the one that I work on, not because I'm working, but the general scope of the project. We decided 2 years ago to implement the first long-lasting bus operation in Latin America for a BRT system, bus rapid transit system. There was a prior project implemented in Sao Paulo in Brazil in 2015, but they only operate for 4 years. That pilot project stopped in 2019. When we started to develop this concept, this idea, we said we would like to join the Transmilenio operation in Bogota for more than 10 years. So what we have implemented so far is to install electrolyzer PEM technology of 165 kilowatts. That's one of the largest right now being in operation in Latin America. Is comparable to those that are now installing also in Chile, for example. But the most innovative part or component of this project is that a company called Marco Polo Superpolo built the bus here in Colombia. Of course, they have to import the main components from overseas, like the fuel cell or the tanks, because at the moment those technologies are not produced in Colombia, but all the engineering, all the assembly, all the mechanical assembly of the technology was developed here in Colombia by that company. So that means that energy transition is not only a matter of converting your energy carriers into renewable sources, but also adding more industry to the current industry basis in the country. So this is super, super interesting in this project. So how many vendors you may find in terms of bus offering? You may say 50, and 40 of them will be in China at the moment, 2 or 3 in Europe, 2 or 3 in Asia. And now Colombia, or from 24 and beyond, Colombia has a company that will also be joining that offering worldwide. We have invested up to $5 million of the total investment for all the components in the project, not only the hydrogen production, but also the bus. And we are having a subsidy from the FENOGE. FENOGE is an office that is working with the energy ministry in Colombia, and they provide financing for energy transition projects like the one that you're seeing here. And here, I'm going to show you a little video on this.
Nuestro compromiso con el planeta nos inspira y por eso el futuro se escribe con H de hidrógeno, un energético abundante, amigable con el medio ambiente y poderoso para avanzar hacia la transición energética. Hoy cumplimos un hito que nos acerca a ese mañana. Inicia el piloto de movilidad sostenible del primer bus para transporte público que rodará con energía renovable por las calles de Bogotá. Un hecho histórico para el país y América Latina. El hidrógeno de bajas emisiones es una de las fuentes de energía con las que afrontaremos el cambio climático, generaremos oportunidades económicas e impulsaremos el desarrollo social. Nos emociona ser líderes y pioneros en la producción, desarrollo y uso del hidrógeno. Así avanzamos en nuestro propósito de mover a Colombia con nuevas energías para asegurar un futuro sostenible.
What you see over there was our branding video when we launched on March the first hydrogen refueling station for a bus rapid transit system in Colombia. The second in Latin America, after Brazil, as I mentioned, and along Chile, the ones that are working or under operation right now in the region. This bus it will be moving in the streets of Bogota in the next quarter. We have been doing all the technology evaluation, all the requirements that the Transmilenio management demands in order to this bus to join the fleet. And the idea is that this bus works for the next 14 years, moving around 100,000 people per year with zero emissions in the system. And having an autonomy and a mileage of 450 kilometers per refuel. So if you compare that, for example, to the battery electric buses that are now working in the system, the autonomy, the mileage is like 3x of what the battery electric solutions may provide. We also have another pilot based in Cartagena. This is for light-duty vehicles, and hopefully next year we'll have here either a bus application or a truck application moving freight around that part of the country. This is located in Cartagena, which is a city in the Caribbean coast of Colombia as well. What I think are the main highlights to end this conversation on my learning history these last 5 years that I've been working in the hydrogen projects. First, scale matters, but pilot projects are so underrated right now in the industry. I was in Korea a month ago talking to the vice president of Hyundai, and he mentioned in a conversation that doing a project for one truck or one bus is as difficult to do a project for 20 buses or 20 trucks. And the way to go, and I understand perfectly, in commercial standing points, the idea is to go 20. So you have a fleet. But the investment will render so high for companies, and especially companies in Latin America. And the idea here is that if you want to be innovative, you may find the best scale to start operating. And that may be a pilot scale in a small scale. And all the knowledge that you will have by implementing such technology is the same, or it will be as important as if you were implementing a project for 20 buses or 20 trucks. So scale matters, but pilot projects are very, very important to start that learning curve, that innovative trend in the company. The second, knowledge transfer is paramount to have a competitive advantage of the market. As countries like Colombia or early adopters, you will find that most likely all the technology is purchased from traditional players like Norway with Nel, or like US like Plug, or any Chinese company right now that is also selling a lot of technologies for the hydrogen use. But the most complicated part of these projects is that you some sort of purchase a turnkey solution, and the knowledge transfer is limited. So all the information that you may gather in those processes of engineering, construction, commissioning, and also operating and maintenance is critical. So you can optimize your capital investment. So you can optimize your operational expenditures in order to have a hydrogen cost so competitive that you could be or convert a into a leading offer in the country or in the international landscape. So the more you know, the more knowledge you can capture from these traditional players, these traditional vendors, and you convert that into efficiency, not only in the designing, but also in the construction and in the operation part of the project, will render a very, very competitive hydrogen price. And that's what you need to succeed in these international markets. And then, last but not least, energy transition projects should be always managed as innovation projects. And this is super interesting because the innovation or energy transition as a case for change is super trendy, is super catchy. And if you would like to sell internally or to a customer a project to convert part of the processes with that technology, you can capture your attention super easy. But you will find that the conversation is going to move in two dimensions. One that is tech-centered because you're adding new technology to the processes, and other that is customer-centered. And this is super important because hydrogen as an energy carrier will have a lot of benefits, but most of them will render in the efficiency side of the business. So you have to be super intelligent of identifying all the profit pools inside the company that will leverage a business case. It's not a matter of decarbonizing the process or the product or the service. It's also identifying all these revenue streams inside the company that will contribute to the financial case of the change, of the shifting of the technology. Most people think that the carbonization costs more, and in general that's true, but in some cases, and especially for these early businesses, you may find, or you have to find, or become creative to identify of these revenue pools and make your business case, adding all those benefits and improving your business case. And that's super important. And the only way to do it is to take into account that it's not a matter of technology. It's not a matter of adding technology packages to the system. It's also understanding the business of your customer and helping him or helping the company to understand all the benefits that this new energy carrier in terms of efficiency, decarbonization, etc., will have in the current processes. So you have to take into account the machines, the equipment, and the people. And to close the conversation and open the space for questions that I've seen here in the chat, some questions right now. There are many challenges still to address in terms of new ways to produce hydrogen, new ways to transport hydrogen. And I think also related to big trends right now in the industry, the terms of how to trace the electrons, making sure that those electrons come from renewable sources, and also the carbon and that carbon accounting. Make sure that you know how much carbon footprint has your hydrogen, and doing that with industry technologies like blockchain and all those kind of industry 5.0 technologies, 4.0 technologies will be super interesting because you will have many trends now converging into one sector. Energy trends, technology trends, information trends, all those kind of innovative solutions will render a lot of room for players to innovate and to put their own business propositions into the market. So thank you for the space, and I think now, Carolina, you'll have the space for questions.
Thank you very much, Horacio. Very insightful, all the information, data, and of course, all the experience that you bring from the different projects and pilots that you have been working on at Ecopetrol, and of course, on the 5 years you've been working for hydrogen. Let me just maybe ask you a couple of questions that the audience is having. Let me start maybe with one over here that I see as a global perspective, and just kind of tap into this last slide that you shared on those challenges faced on this race to pretty much start producing and absorbing the hydrogen overall. So do you see like any way that we can probably accelerate that let's say learning and transfer knowledge from one country to the other country, from one project to the other project, to be able to accelerate this industry in a much faster way?
Yes, of course, and with spaces like this, like think tanks, like cooperation spaces, with associations, I think that multilateral agreements of knowledge transfer is super interesting. We have been working with associations from Chile, from Brazil, from all over Latin America to exchange some knowledge, some learning lessons learn, and all those things that we think are critical. Of course, we are not sharing our secrets in terms of CapEx optimizations or OpEx optimizations, but I think the general guidelines of what have been learned in the pilot stages are shared in a regular way. I think I have attended like 10 spaces like that in this year alone. And you have some cooperation offices like from Japan, from Korea, from Germany, promoting spaces like this. So I think it has become like a regional effort, because it's a regional opportunity for Latin America to become the primary or the main hub of hydrogen exports for all the world. We are racing as a region against Middle East. So sharing some knowledge among us is quite customary nowadays. And the idea is to keep that up.
Thank you. And related to that answer, Horacio, regarding being Latin America like this hub for pretty much supply of hydrogen, the world. Is the demand is going to be able to absorb whatever we can produce from Latin America, from the Middle East, or from any other country? Or will we need to kind of have a differentiator somehow in terms of safety, in terms of as you were saying, how green it is, or things like that? Or do you think that the demand is going to be large enough to be able to absorb that production?
I think we have to do both things. I mean, the volume is there. For example, in Korea, last month, some companies make some bold statements. They say we are going to import 5 million tons by 2030. That's a lot. If you see the Colombia's goal by 2030 is to be roughly 500,000 tons, so 0.5 million. That would exceed 10 times, 20 times what a country may produce by themselves in that time frame. If you see regions like the port of Rotterdam, I say regions because they are the main hub for energy products for Europe, they state that would require over 10 millions by 2030. And by 2040, it will be roughly 20 million tons of hydrogen or derivatives, low emissions, zero emissions. So the volume is going to be there. Now, of course, this is a worldwide business. Competition is going to be all over the place. And I think we need to do our homework. We need to accelerate the renewable installed capacity in terms of electricity, because that's your main source of energy to produce hydrogen. So I think in Latin America, all the countries has a lot of potential, but all the countries are lacking installed capacity operating and available to produce anything, hydrogen, for example. So I think we have to accelerate that, and I think countries like Colombia are acknowledging that. And for example, in parallel to the hydrogen roadmap, there is also the wind roadmap that will contribute also to that. So it's like a chicken and egg problem in many nests. So we have to make our homework on that. And I think we could have some sort of differentiation products or differentiated products because countries, for example, like the Middle East countries, for example, like Chile, they are lacking biogenic sources of carbon. So either they transform the way they manage the land to develop energy crops, or they won't be playing in options like methanol or e-jet that would require that carbon, and they will stay with ammonia. And that's no surprise. If you see Chile, if you see Middle East large projects, they will produce ammonia because they don't have a biogenic source of carbon yet developed. Countries like Colombia, countries like Brazil, that we have a lot of biomass, may provide things like methanol, like e-jet, like e-kerosene, and the rest of renewable hydrocarbons to the world. And if we succeed on that, we will not be fighting against Chile or Middle East, for example. We will be leading that part of the offering. And we have to see if we are able to develop those products.
So one more question regarding that race that every country is kind of trying to enter. What is the funding gonna come from for that energy transition? Is this mainly a governmental kind of bet from the different countries, or this is gonna be mainly coming from the private sector? What do you think?
I think it's going to be a mix that will be shifting over time. I think in these early stages is super important, the contribution from the public sector, from the government. Actually, for example, the pilot that I show you, as I mentioned before, the FENOGE contribution, which is a public office, they contribute up to 40% of the capex. So it's quite critical to have those numbers in a most likely competitive basis. In the future, in order to this energy transition economy lasts, you have to make it competitive for the private sector, as it is competitive right now for the natural gas, for the oil and gas. And I think it's also part of the transition. That's what a transition is. And you will have some early adopters that may fund this kind of projects. They do it as an innovation projects, meaning that this is a very high risk capital that they allocate for these pilot projects. In some companies, they would think that this is money for the future, so they just sunk it and whatever. Uh, in terms of R&D and these kind of initiatives. But I think by 2030, when you expect that this market emerges with large projects, large volumes compared to those that we have right now, you have to make it a business. And we have 7 years for the private sectors to do the homework, to find the answers, to become creative and implement those solutions in a way that it renders some sort of profit. And if we succeed on that, I think by 2040 and 2050, this will be the primary economy worldwide in terms of energy, of course.
Okay, this is amazing. Thank you very much, Horacio. I think we are running out of time here, but it was very insightful. Thank you very much. We will be sharing the recording with all the attendees just for them to be able to reference your speech and your insights. So thank you, Horacio. Any last words that you want to mention to the crowd?
Welcome. If you are here, it's because you are interested in the energy transition, in these energy trends, that you're willing to implement your own projects. Don't hesitate to contact if you have any questions furthermore through Carolina or through any digital media. And super eager to know you. I know some folks here in the crowd already. So the idea is to share the knowledge, to share the technology, the options, and to build industry. I think it's very important that we all the participants in these forums, in these spaces put their effort, no matter how big or how tiny, and to build the industry that is emerging worldwide. So thank you for your assistance and the invitation as well.
Thank you very much, Horacio. Eddie, I'm going to pass it to you now. Thank you very much.
If I can just add one small comment to what Horacio just presented, I would appeal to everybody to look at the scenario, the what if scenario of a lot of industries driven by consumers and regulation and everything else want to guarantee advanced purchase agreements and off-taking from green hydrogen. Or what if green hydrogen and green ammonia became major sources by 2030, not by 2050? So the whole thing is the what if. There's a tremendous drive from different sources to accelerate this. Are we ready? Are we ready as Colombia? Are we ready as Ecopetrol? Are we ready as other off-takers to do that? Because this is, without question, a race. And the technologies are there. It's not technology inhibited, it's investment constrained, and it's risk mitigated, because a lot of people have stranded assets that would become problematic if this happened really fast. On the other hand, a lot of people want to move very fast because of consumer demand, government demand, and everything else. So I would just appeal to everybody to think about the what if this happens faster, and how do we catch up or lead in a kind of rapid poly kind of work.
Thank you very much, Ron. And thank you, Global Innovation Management Institute, for the invitation on this energy transition network that we are pushing forward. Thank you, everyone.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much, Horacio, for this insightful presentation. Thank you very much, Carolina, for managing basically and inviting this amazing speaker. This was one of the first webinars that we will do on green hydrogen. We are very certain that this is one of the topics that we need to speak more and we need to do more. I would like all the GIMI basically partners, ambassadors who are here to inform that last 2 weeks we did like Innova Latam and we did Innova Philippines. So it were two amazing events where basically we awarded many companies on level 3 and level 4. We awarded Dubai Police on the highest level, which is level 4 on innovation management and future foresight. We are posting out there in LinkedIn and in the website, so please follow. Very soon, we will share with you the GIMI achievement video for 2023. Which I can say right now that it looks amazing and we have done lots of progress. So thank you very much. We'll see each other next time for the GCIO webinar on December 6th. Stay tuned. Bye, everyone.